In this lecture segment, we are talking about pilgrimage and Romanesque art and architecture. We will focus on two Romanesque pilgrimage churches and a reliquary. The Romanesque period is from about 1050-ish to 1200. The term was first used in 1871 and means Roman-like, referring to the building of churches using round arches, groin vaults, barrel vaults, and thick buttresses. But really, it's a catch-all term for the art made between the Carolingian and Ottonian periods and the Gothic, which comes a bit later. In contrast to what we saw in Carolingian and Ottonian art, which was confined to just a portion of Europe and centered in the imperial court, the Romanesque emerges all over Europe, with each region developing its own local vocabulary or local style and a massive campaign of church building across Europe. Catholicism was the religion of Europe, and even the Vikings, who had still been causing mayhem during the Carolingian period, settle down and Christianize. It's a time of significant religious fervor. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, Roman cities shrunk or were abandoned, but during the Romanesque, some cities regain their strength, new towns are established. These societal changes are made possible by new and revived trading routes, including the re-establishment of Mediterranean trade routes that linked parts of Europe together again, supporting economic growth and cultural interchange. The Church is still the only central authority in Europe, and the Catholic Church officially separates from the Byzantine Church, the Orthodox Church, in 1054. Politically, it's still broken up into various kingdoms, so the Pope and his power provide some degree of unity, and the network of monasteries Charlemagne established have significant power and wealth, which helps to support city building and education across Europe. The religious enthusiasm of this age is both expressed and encouraged by the pilgrimage. Pilgrimage was not a new concept, but it is popularized in large part during this period. A pilgrimage is a journey to a holy place. In this period there were military pilgrimages, the Crusades, when the Church, with support from kings, tried to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslims, leading armed expeditions of armies to battle for control of the places where people believed Christ had walked, died, and been buried. And there is no more sacred site in Christianity at this time than the places directly associated with Christ. There were also pilgrimages closer to home. The top of the list was Rome, where St. Peter, as the first bishop of Rome, established the Catholic Church, where he was martyred and buried. But Rome was hard to get to, and the city of Rome was not in good shape and had not recovered from its significant decline after the fall of the Roman Empire. The next most desirable holy place to go on pilgrimage is Santiago de Compostela in Spain, where the relics of St. James were kept. And this pilgrimage destination, less dangerous than the Holy Land and more convenient than Rome, becomes the #1 pilgrimage destination in Europe. During this period of time, people wanted to go on pilgrimage for lots of reasons. They pay homage to saints and Christ and make gifts. They wanted to go on pilgrimage to become closer to deity. They wanted to go on pilgrimage to reduce their time in purgatory, to be healed from an illness, to have that type of closeness that would help them better be able to secure their salvation in the next world. So we have the development of a pilgrimage highway in Europe that carried pilgrims from where they lived, walking months on the road to Spain to be close to the relics of St. James. So think about going on a trip through Kansas, driving on I-70, and think about what you need on your trip across Kansas. Food, gas, medical care, lodging, the essentials. So towns along this route, or towns who will want to be on the route, will provide the types of services pilgrims need, which will bolster their economies. These towns will want to be way stations on the journey, and one of the best ways for them to become desirable sites for pilgrims is if they, too, become pilgrimage destinations. So these towns will get their own relics or reinstall their relics and build churches to house those relics, attracting pilgrims and boosting their economies as cities compete with each other for pilgrimage attention. Think about cities today competing to host the NCAA tournament or the Olympics. They revitalize and expand their cities to attract those events so their cities can have the economic boost, accompanying a huge influx of visitors who need places to stay and food to eat. This robust pilgrimage highway facilitates greater contact between peoples and cultures, which will help set the stage for later developments in Europe. This pilgrimage network generates a lot of money, provides a degree of economic stability, and spurs on the creation of new churches to manage the huge influx of pilgrims taking the pilgrimage highway during the Romanesque period. So let's go back to Aachen to introduce pilgrimage further. The palace chapel at Aachen becomes encased by the Aachen Cathedral building, and the cathedral has significant relics that Charlemagne acquired from the Holy Land. Remember that a relic is an object associated with a holy person. A primary relic is a part of a holy person and is therefore sacred. The crown of thorns, the veil of Saint Veronica, for example. The holy relics of Aachen are all pieces of cloth associated with holy figures. They are kept in a reliquary, a vessel to hold a relic, to hold the sacred object, and often that reliquary, as you see here, is made of precious materials and looks and functions like a treasure chest. Every 7 years since the Middle Ages, the Aachen pilgrimage has taken place when people go to Aachen to see the relics which have been removed from the reliquary to be displayed publicly for this special occasion. The next Aachen pilgrimage will be in 2021. Pilgrims want to come and be close to the relics because they are sacred, holy objects by virtue of their connection to a holy person. So by being close to them, a pilgrim becomes more holy, bettering chances at salvation. Part of the pilgrimage economy is not just the lodging and food purchased in their pilgrimage towns, but also the souvenirs. This print in the collection of the Spencer Museum of Art at KU is a metal cut, a print that depicts the holy relics of Aachen, and could be purchased by a pilgrim as a souvenir and perhaps as a devotional or meditational device to meditate on the experience of seeing the relics and having an uplifting spiritual journey. So a rough equivalent to buying like a shot glass or a keychain as a souvenir to remember a journey. This is a massive movement of people with spiritual motivations and has a huge impact on the development of Europe. During the Romanesque period, we see the construction of countless churches that are adapted in material and design to the demands of pilgrimage. While we do see Roman elements, round arches, barrel vaults, groin vaults, we do not see concrete being used. Instead, we see cut stone, but no concrete. Let's look at an example of an adorable Romanesque church in the town of Conques in France. This church was part of a monastery and became a stop on the route to see the relics of St. James in Spain. But part of the story here is how this town became a destination on the journey. The monks stole the reliquary and the relics of the saint that are now housed here from a monastery in a nearby town in an act of furta sacra, or sacred theft. If the relics of the saint did not find their way back to the previous town, then the saint really wanted her relics in Conques anyway. After stealing the reliquary and relics, a new church in the new pilgrimage design was built to provide an appropriate setting for the relics, as well as manage the pilgrimage traffic the town would have now that they had an important relic. This is a small but effective example to explore pilgrimage church design. We see a tidy little church with a tall westwork from Carolingian architecture, a cruciform shaped like a cross, with a longitudinal axis from the basilica plan that pushes the viewer forward to the apse end of the church, where the relics would be kept. In this view, you can clearly see that cross shape and the elaboration on the apse end. So then let's look in detail at this plan to help you be familiar with the typical parts of a Romanesque church. A worshipper enters from the west portal on the west end and enters the nave, the main space of the church. The nave is flanked by aisles, just like at Old St. Peter's. A transept is perpendicular to the nave and provides more space for worshippers. Where the nave and transept meet is the crossing, which is marked by a crossing tower on the exterior. As we approach the apse, we have the choir, where the monks would sing the Mass, and the altar, the area that would be off limits to folks who are not clergy. And then we have the apse end and the ambulatory or circular walkway, and radiating chapels, these little niches that would hold relics. So the path a pilgrim would take would be to enter on the west end of the church and see the sculptures at the west portal, being taught about the Last Judgment and how to receive salvation. Follow an aisle back to the transept and visit all the relics they could at little chapels here on the transept, and then all along the ambulatory. And after finishing being in the presence of the relics, the pilgrims could leave via an extra exit here on the transept arm. So with the aisle, the ambulatory, and the extra exit, designers prepared a path for road-weary pilgrims to enter, visit the relics, and leave efficiently. This becomes the pattern of church design in the Romanesque period, a plan that helps pilgrims get in and out efficiently. On the interior of the church, we have a nave arcade, or row of arches supported by these thick piers. as well as thick buttressing on the outside walls. The main nave space has barrel vaults, while the side aisles have groin vaults, indicated by the X shapes on the plan. The structure is thick, solid, encouraging the viewer to move towards the apse end where the reliquaries were kept. As the structure was made of cut stone instead of wood, it is more fireproof than earlier churches, and had better acoustics for hearing the Mass. The pilgrim's goal was this: to see the reliquary of Sainte Foy, Saint Faith, a child saint who was martyred in around 300 for refusing to renounce Christianity and convert to paganism. According to tradition, her skull is the relic inside of this lavish reliquary, and we see an emphasis on the visuality of the head in this figure. It's covered in all sorts of interesting gems and cameos that it acquired over time, perhaps as donations from pilgrims who came to visit the relics of Sainte Foy and felt compelled to donate their riches. Stories develop about Sainte Foy being a greedy little girl who demanded donations from pilgrims who faced retribution if they did not comply, showing the living presence this saint had. She was then and now a very popular saint. Today, the reliquary is paraded regularly through the streets of Conques, a pattern we've seen in Egypt, Rome, and Greece, of special celebrations to make the sacred public and allow all people to participate in honoring deity, with a focus on a sculpture seen as having divine power. So here at Conques, we see the development of pilgrimage church design, the importance of relics and reliquaries, and the desire of communities to be on the route to Spain to further the status and prosperity of their towns. Let's look at another pilgrimage church on the route to Santiago de Compostela, this one in Toulouse, the Church of Saint Sernin. It's right on the pilgrimage route to Spain and is a much bigger church than Sainte Foy, so it has the same basic elements, just made on a larger scale. It was both a monastery church and needed to have the space for large groups of pilgrims. In this satellite view, we see its Latin cross shape and its dominant place in the city. Here's an aerial view and a plan. Let's practice again the parts of a pilgrimage church. The main entrance is on the west, which was supposed to have 2 towers which were never built. The nave here is much longer and bigger than Sainte Foy, with 2 aisles flanking it, which create a continuous path for the pilgrim to visit the relics in the apse. It has a large transept and crossing tower, which was built in the Gothic period. We have chapels on the transept and radiating chapels in the apse that a pilgrim would access using the ambulatory. The choir and altar would be cordoned off from regular visitors. Doors on the transept arms helped pilgrims easily exit the structure. In this view of the exterior, we are looking at the apse end with those radiating chapels, like horseshoes tacked on the outside that held sacred objects or relics, as well as the transept doors that were used to help funnel pilgrims. Think about the last time you went to a concert and the flood of people exiting the arena at one time. Many doors makes for speedier and safer exits for large groups of people. On the interior, the nave ceiling is a barrel vault, with each of these lines indicating a transverse arch, or a round arch supporting the tunnel-like vault. Piers support each of the transverse arches. Each aisle is a groin vault, indicated by an X in the plan. Notice the regularity in the church design and how the size of the crossing is replicated throughout the church, creating units called bays. It is similar to the unit-based approach that we talked about with the plan of St. Gall, with each pair of transverse arches outlining a bay that is half the size of the crossing. Thick buttresses or supporting walls on the outside, the solid black in the plan, counter the thrust of the vault and support the structure by applying exterior pressure. The rhythm of the nave, its regularity and order, help to propel the viewer towards the apse end of the church where the altar and relics are. In the nave, we have a 2-part nave elevation, which means we have a nave arcade or row of arches as the first story, and then a gallery level above, with windows to help the nave have more light. In this view of the nave vault, we see the transverse arches springing from these substantial piers over the vault of the ceiling and then down the other side of the nave. And then in this image, we see the nave arcade plus the gallery level above, giving us a better sense of the rhythm of the space and how it propels us forward to the most sacred part of the church. We have a vaulted structure made using cut stone, which allowed for a more fire-resistant building that would be safer for large groups of people, as well as magnify the spiritual experience of hearing the Mass resonate in a stone rather than wood space. At Saint-Sernin, we see another example of a church responding to the demands of pilgrimage in design and materials, using a plan for crowd control and stone to make the structure more fire-resistant and to magnify the effect of singing the Mass.